Welcome to part 2 of my character design process series. Today I will be showing y'all how I go about exploring a character design through iterations. In the previous video I showed y'all how I start a character design with initial sketches and silhouettes. So if you haven't watched part 1, definitely go do that so that you aren't confused about what is going on in this video. Let's do a quick recap of where we are at in this character design. So in part 1 we left off with these 2 crappy sketches where I explored how her magical sword retracts into armor. Now with these 2 sketches in mind, they will be my jumping off point for the iterations and explorations for this character design. To start off my first batch of iterations, I shaded this base figure so that I can just copy pasta and paint on top. And I start painting shapes on top of the figure to explore the sword and her attire. For a lot of artists during this iterations phase, they do line sketches, but I consider myself a painter over a draftsman, which is why you see me painting over drawing these iterations. And I'm working at getting better at drawing for myself personally, but drawing is just slower to me when it comes to designing. So blocking out shapes like this is just easier for me to see the full picture and different design aspects. My method of exploration probably takes a little bit longer than some other artists just because I am painting over drawing. But for me, this blocking out method is faster and easier for me to explore different ideas. Also, I found that I get inspired to try out some new different directions that I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And once I have like this basic base to work off of, it's just easier to switch out parts because I'm just painting on top. And then when I paint each different article of clothing or accessory, I always leave them in separate layers so that it's easy to just flick through and figure out what works and what doesn't work. For me personally, my sketches are really messy, so these grayscale paintings are way cleaner and easier for people to look at the design and see what the heck I'm trying to communicate. One of the biggest plus of painting versus drawing iterations is that if you are working with a team, it is way easier to show the team the basic gist of a design. For example, I worked on a 7-week game project where we wanted to make a realistic sci-fi thriller game. And I did these quick grayscale paintings to explore how we would want the enemy character to possibly look like. And the team was very excited to see these quick paintings that I made because now they have a base idea of what could be possible and where our game could probably go. Also, this made it easier for the 3D artists on my team to be able to read the design as well as make it easier for them just to make something quick for the blackout phase in game development. And if need be, I can quickly add colors by just adding an overlay layer on top. So for quick designing and relaying the design to other people, I found that grayscale tends to be what I prefer and is just easier and better for me personally. Another thing to keep in mind is that value is more important than color in this stage of the design process. What I mean by this is that color can cloud your judgment. So focusing on values of light and dark tones makes it faster for you to iterate and explore your ideas faster. I found that when I used color for iterations, it slowed me down. So I'm speaking of this from experience. Don't worry about colors. Because if you are thinking about color theory on top of designing a design, that's just more things than your brain can probably handle. So focusing on one before the other is definitely gonna help your design process out. Although, if you do already know what colors you want to use, iterating with colors is actually pretty painless because you aren't picking the colors. So as long as you know what colors go where, it should be pretty easy. I did this color blockout method for my art book Grithyard from the Heart, and I used this method to help block out my character designs for the main characters in the book because I already knew what kind of colors I wanted, and it was just faster for me to explore with colors just to get a visual direction of where I want a design to go. So you can use color for iterating, just make sure you have an already existing color palette that you're going to use and know exactly what you're going to use it for. I guess my point that I'm trying to get across when it comes to iteration and designing, your method should be the fastest way for you to be able to explore a lot of different ideas, as well as being able to communicate those ideas to yourself and other people. If someone doesn't understand your design, you did a bad job communicating. Okay? Fix your art. So this is the first set of iterations. I did only 4 of them, with each being very different from each other. So the first one is like an adventurer warrior, the second a latex dungeon warrior, the third being like a ritual warrior, and then the last one being a new and improved version of the adventure warrior. After sleeping again and waking up the next day, I decided that I wanted to move forward with this last design that I did, because I thought it looked the coolest. Because cloaks are cool and this sword looks cool too. Also, I really like the top that I slapped on her, because if she is gonna have armor in her normie mode, I wouldn't want anything big to be hindering the armor. I'm trying to make this design appear feasible, that a sword can actually contract into armor. So frumpy, bulky clothing would not go so well for this design. With this in mind, I ended up inverting the values of the design, and I actually really liked how this version looked. But I wasn't yet happy with the bottom of her design. Like, her pants and shoes were just kind of like, eh. So I decided to explore those with this next round of iterations. With each round of iterations that I do, I like to get more specific, moving closer to how I want the character design to look. And I really like these tight pants, and it also makes more sense for an adventurer with a sword to be wearing pants. It wouldn't look good to give her baggy pants, because then it might clash with the sword design and that might just look weird. And I also didn't want her to wear a skirt, because it wouldn't be practical for an adventurer. Like, if she's climbing up a mountain or something, she would just be flashing whoever was down below, which I guess to some people could be considered a good thing. But for me and this character design, nah. Another thing that I was thinking about while I was painting is if she is an adventurer, she needs like pockets and pouches to carry some of her stuff that she is traveling with. And her half cloak is important to help establish that adventurer kind of feel to her. But a cloak isn't as practical as some pockets and pouches, so I just decided to add both. As you probably already noticed, I haven't done any versions of her normie mode with her wearing the armor, and that's because 1, I'm lazy, and 2, I thought it'd just be quicker to just only focus on one portion of the design, so I can quickly go through iterations of what she looks like underneath the armor in her warrior mode. So I decided just to figure out the armor portion in part 3 when I go through finalizing the character design. One of the things that I was struggling with while doing these iterations was how to indicate that she's in a fantasy world living as a fantasy character. Now, her unicorn horn like already kind of indicates that she is a magical creature from some other world, but nothing else indicates that she doesn't exist in our realm. And I want to add that extra spark of magicalness and fantasy to her design. But to be honest, I think I failed in that regard doing these iterations, because she looks like a basic adventurer with a horn slapped on top of her head, and that she has a big magical sword. But I think when I move on to her final design, I can add some of those magical accessories in. Like, maybe I can add some special belts or buckles or magical embroidery of some kind. She's got a necklace, so maybe I can make some cohesive design elements that will make her sparkle. You'll find out what I decide to do in part 3. Thank you so much for watching part 2 of my character design process series. Make sure you like and subscribe for part 3, where I'll be going through how I finalize a character design, with how I render, how I choose colors, all that lovely stuff. And I've been trying out a new editing method for this tutorial series by adding graphics and sound effects. So comment down below what you think of it and if I should continue making videos in this style after I finish this tutorial series. And otherwise, I will see you in part 3.